It's hard to get across how big a technical revolution CRISPR is. It literally has the potential to change humanity forever. Why did this sudden revolution happen, and how does it work? Bacteria and viruses have been fighting since the dawn of life. So-called bacteriophages or phages hunt bacteria. In the ocean, phages kill 40% of them every single day. Phages do this by inserting their own genetic code into the bacteria and taking them over to use them as factories. The bacteria try to resist, but fail most of the time because their protection tools are too weak. But sometimes bacteria survive an attack. Only if they do so can they activate their most effective antivirus system. They save a part of the virus DNA in their own genetic code in a DNA archive called CRISPR. Here, it's stored safely until it's needed. When the virus attacks again, the bacterium quickly makes an RNA copy from the DNA archive and arms a secret weapon, a protein called Cas9. The protein now scans the bacterium's insides for signs of the virus invader by comparing every bit of DNA it finds to the sample from the archive. When it finds a 100% perfect match, it's activated and cuts out the virus DNA, making it useless, protecting the bacterium against the attack. What's special is that Cas9 is very precise, almost like a DNA surgeon. The revolution began when scientists figured out that the CRISPR system is programmable. You can just give it a copy of DNA you want to modify and put the system into a living cell. If the old techniques of genetic liquidation were like a map, CRISPR is like a GPS system. Aside from being precise, cheap and easy, CRISPR offers the ability to edit live cells, to switch genes on and off, and target and study particular DNA sequences. It also works for every type of cell, microorganisms, plants, animals or humans. But despite the revolution CRISPR is for science, it's still just a first-generation tool. More precise tools are already being created and used as we speak. In 2015, scientists used CRISPR to cut the HIV virus out of living cells from patients in the lab, proving that it was possible. Only about a year later, they carried out a larger-scale project with rats that had the HIV virus in basically all of their body cells. By simply injecting CRISPR into the rats' tails, they were able to remove more than 50% of the virus from cells all over the body. In a few decades, a CRISPR therapy might cure HIV. And other retroviruses, viruses that hide inside human DNA, like herpes, could be eradicated this way. CRISPR could also defeat one of our worst enemies, cancer. Cancer occurs when cells refuse to die and keep multiplying while concealing themselves from the immune system. CRISPR gives us the means to edit your immune cells and make them better cancer hunters. Getting rid of cancer might eventually mean getting just a couple of injections of a few thousand of your own cells that have been engineered in the lab to heal you for good. The first clinical trial for a CRISPR cancer treatment on human patients was approved in early 2016 in the US. Not even a month later, Chinese scientists announced that they would treat lung cancer patients with immune cells modified with CRISPR in August 2016. Things are picking up pace quickly. And then there are genetic diseases. There are thousands of them, and they range from mildly annoying to deadly or entail decades of suffering. With a powerful tool like CRISPR, we may be able to end this. Over 3,000 genetic diseases are caused by a single incorrect letter in your DNA. We are already building a modified version of Cas9 that is made to change just a single letter, fixing the disease in the cell. In a decade or two, we could possibly cure thousands of diseases forever. But all of these medical applications have one thing in common. They are limited to the individual and die with them, except if you use them on reproductive cells or very early embryos. But CRISPR can and probably will be used for much more. The creation of modified humans, designer babies, and will mean gradual but irreversible changes to the human gene pool. The means to edit the genome of a human embryo already exist, though the technology is still in its early stages, but it has already been attempted twice. In 2015 and 2016, Chinese scientists experimented with human embryos and were partially successful on their second attempt. They showed the enormous challenges we still face in gene scenarios, but also that scientists are working on solving them. This is like the computer in the 70s. There will be better computers. Regardless of your personal take on genetic engineering, it will affect you. Modified humans could alter the genome of our entire species because their engineered traits will be passed on to their children and could spread over generations, slowly modifying the whole gene pool of humanity. It will start slowly. The first designer babies will not be overly designed. It's most likely that they will be created to eliminate a deadly genetic disease running in a family. As the technology progresses and gets more refined, more and more people may argue that not using genetic modification is unethical because it condemns children to preventable suffering and death and denies them the cure. But as soon as the first engineered kid is born, a door is opened that can't be closed anymore. Early on, vanity traits will mostly be left alone. But as genetic modification becomes more accepted and our knowledge of our genetic code enhances, the temptation will grow. If you make your offspring immune to Alzheimer, why not also give them an enhanced metabolism? Why not throw in perfect eyesight? How about height or muscular structure? Full hair? How about giving your child the gift of extraordinary intelligence? Huge changes are made as a result of the personal decisions of millions of individuals that accumulate. This is a slippery slope. Modified humans could become the new standard. But as engineering becomes more normal and our knowledge improves, we could solve the single biggest mortality risk factor, aging. 2/3 of the 150,000 people who die today will die of age-related causes. Currently, we think aging is caused by the accumulation of damage to our cells, like DNA breaks and the systems responsible for fixing those wearing off over time. But there are also genes that directly affect aging. A combination of genetic engineering and other therapy could stop or slow down aging, maybe even reverse it. We know from nature that there are animals immune to aging. Maybe we could even borrow a few genes for ourselves. Some scientists even think biological aging could be something that eventually just stops being a thing. We would still die at some point, but instead of doing so in hospitals at age 90, we might be able to spend a few thousand years with our loved ones. Research into this is in its infancy. And many scientists are rightly skeptical about the end of aging. The challenges are enormous, and maybe it is unachievable. But it is conceivable that people alive today might be the first to profit from effective anti-aging therapy. All we might need is for someone to convince a smart billionaire to make it their next problem to solve. On a bigger scale, we certainly could solve many problems by having a modified population. Engineered humans might be better equipped to cope with high-energy food, eliminating many diseases of civilization like obesity. In possession of a modified immune system, with a library of potential threats, we might become immune to most diseases that haunt us today. Even further into the future, we could engineer humans to be equipped for extended space travel and to cope with different conditions on other planets, which would be extremely helpful in keeping us alive in our hostile universe. Still, a few major challenges await us, some technological, some ethical. Many of you watching will feel uncomfortable and fear that we will create a world in which we will reject non-perfect humans and pre-select features and qualities based on our idea of what's healthy. The thing is, we are already living in this world. Tests for dozens of genetic diseases or complications have become standard for pregnant women in much of the world. Often, the mere suspicion of a genetic defect can lead to the end of a pregnancy. Take Down syndrome, for example, one of the most common genetic defects. In Europe, about 92% of all pregnancies where it's detected are terminated. The decision to terminate a pregnancy is incredibly personal, but it's important to acknowledge the reality that we are pre-selecting humans based on medical conditions. There is also no use in pretending this will change, so we have to act carefully and respectfully as we advance the technology and can make more and more selections. But none of this will happen soon. As powerful as CRISPR is, and it is, it's not infallible yet. Wrong edits still happen, as well as unknown errors that can occur anywhere in the DNA and might go unnoticed. The gene edit might achieve the desired result, disabling a disease, but also might accidentally trigger unwanted changes. We just don't know enough yet about the complex interplay of our genes to avoid unpredictable consequences. Working on accuracy and monitoring methods is a major concern as the first human trials begin. And since we've discussed a possible positive future, there are darker visions too. Imagine what a state like North Korea could do if they embraced genetic engineering. Could a state cement its rule forever by forcing gene editing on their subjects? What would stop a totalitarian regime from engineering an army of modified super soldiers? It is doable in theory. Scenarios like this one are far, far off into the future, if they ever become possible at all. But the basic proof of concept for genetic engineering like this already exists today. The technology really is that powerful. While this might be a tempting reason to ban genetic editing and related research, that would certainly be a mistake. Banning human genetic engineering would only lead to the science wandering off to a place with jurisdiction and rules that we're uncomfortable with. Only by participating can we make sure that further research is guided by caution, reason, oversight, and transparency.
Okay, thanks.
Do you feel uncomfortable?
Now, that's a lot to take in, but did you hear all the forevers? And did you see that there are a lot of things that may look appealing to people, but then they keep saying, this is decades away and all that. The problem with that is this clip doesn't take into reality that they're working on artificial intelligence, that computers are not going to have to be programmed anymore, but they will program and work with each other. In fact, I read one story that Google set up a couple of computers and put in the algorithms for them to be able to work on things together and be able to communicate with each other. And they took off and things were going really well. They were pretty excited about what these computers were able to do and how they were learning, taking in information and growing, until the computers decided that the language that they had been given to work with was too slow. And they created their own language. And Google was not able to figure it out anymore, and they had to turn it off because they didn't know what the computers were working on anymore. As you think about the fact that we're entrusting our lives to the Lord and that all of these things are in the full understanding of God, He knows what's coming and all of that. Maybe this helps you, maybe it helps me understand why God did what He did at the Tower of Babel. When He slowed down the whole process of what mankind was going to present himself to be able to do. And that restraining process that God created has held us back from many of the things that we would have done to have damaged ourselves well into advance of this time. You see, I don't have a problem with thinking about people not having cancer anymore, Parkinson's disease, or those sorts of things. But whenever you say that China is one of the main groups that's working on that, Chinese science doesn't have the same values that we have. They're prepared to do something for financial reasons, for superiority cases. I mean, we saw that in how many of you have been to a Holocaust museum? You've been to one? Could you bring yourself to look over the wall to see down in there some of the things that were going on that were representative of some of the Nazi experiments to try to create a super race, and the experiments that they were doing on Jews to try to come up with a way to make themselves superior? Our world has already proven it will go and do whatever it has to go and do to get what it wants. Revelation chapter 6. As you see this passage, you're looking at the one who is going to have access to all of this technology, all this artificial intelligence, and more. And as you look at that, it says in verse 2, I looked and behold a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. This is one of many passages about the Antichrist. You would call him the little horn if you were studying him in the book of Daniel. But the idea is that this person is, as we're going to see, have the ability to take control of all of these things, just like the little example about North Korea in the clip, and to use them for his purposes. Now notice that in the second seal and in verse 4, another horse goes out right in behind the one that we see the Antichrist with. And this horse is the red one. It was granted to take peace from the earth, that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. And so already I have in my lifetime, for those of you who are younger than me, dealt with the reality every day from the time I first became aware of it, that nuclear weapons could kill everything and everybody that I knew. And we haven't worried about it. And somehow or another, there was a sense, even in the Cold War, even when we had Soviet technology moving into Cuba, and the Kennedy presidency was dealing with the reality that we might have been right on the verge of a nuclear exchange. There was still this sense for all of us that something was restraining this, something was holding this back. And yet, even today, on shows like we're about to see a short clip, I promise, a short clip from, this is going to be from CBN. I just wanted you to see some of the things that our government is dealing with right now today. That should be the end of it.
Just the past 8 months, federal authorities have issued several public warnings about foreign hackers penetrating the United States power grid and other critical infrastructure. Cyber